because it's not just the gut, it's the gut's connection, as we talked about last time, to the brain and to the skin and to the immune system.
Hey friend, welcome to the Ready to Rise podcast with your host, me, Audrey Rose. This is the podcast all about taking your life to the next level. Join me on my journey as I create a life that I'm obsessed to wake up for every day. I hope that you are ready to create a life that you really, really love. Are you ready to rise? You guys might remember Kim from back in the early episodes. Kim Kulp is a registered dietitian, and she has tons of information since she specializes in gut health. She has her own private practice and so much education behind this whole thing. Since it's becoming such a buzzword and I've struggled with it a lot myself, I figured we should have her back on to chat a little bit more. So here's Kim. I'm really looking forward to this. I've been thinking about this for a few days now and just talking about gut health and everything because, like you said, there's so much, there's so many myths out there and people are just kind of saying things. It's becoming such a buzzword.
It's such a buzzword, and it's such an area for people to try to make money on.
It is.
And that's what I always try to tell people is take a breath when you hear something and think, who is someone making money on this? Are they selling something? If they're selling their book or they're selling their special series or they're selling a supplement in particular or some test, then just question it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's so much. I had a friend message me not long ago, and she was like, oh, I found this program. Some nurse is doing it, and she's teaching about gut health and all this great stuff. And it's $3,000 for like a month. I was like, no, here's Kim's website.
Right. And the thing that's crazy is people will pay that.
Yeah.
But they'll question sometimes paying for an hour with someone who is an expert. It's really interesting what is intriguing about some of this to some people.
Yeah, that's so true. I definitely want to kind of talk, like, I know that you definitely can bust some of the myths that we've been hearing. So I think that would be good. And then I just kind of want to talk about gut health in general. Because last time I had you on, I was personally so focused on the connection between the mind and the gut.
Mm-hmm.
That I was trying to kind of understand gut health, but I wasn't as interested as I am now. And it's just, it's fascinating. And
it is fascinating. And, we're learning, we still have so much to learn. And that's the key part is we're just scratching the surface on this. But there's so much. Because it's not just the gut, it's the gut's connection, as we talked about last time, to the brain and to the skin and to the immune system and to the liver and the hormones and metabolism. And like I said, just starting to learn.
Yeah, there's a lot. Where should we start?
Where should we start? Well, I always like to start with, what is gut health? It's a buzzword thrown around, but, what does that really mean? There isn't one set definition. So like when I talk about it or I talk amongst my peers, what we're really talking about really is like, is your digestive system functioning well? And then really it's what we would call barrier function. A lot of people hear that as leaky gut, is that barrier between your intestines and the outside world really healthy so that things aren't, I guess you could say, leaking out, or which can cause some sort of immune responses. And in some cases, like in Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, you see more of that. But that would be part of gut health, keeping that barrier really healthy.
Okay.
And then, of course, the balance of microbes as we learn more about which ones and what they create.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of want to know what the symptoms are that lead somebody to seek your help, or what are signs of an unhealthy gut?
Right. Well, that can be two different things, because sometimes what might be uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean it's unhealthy.
Weird.
But if it's uncomfortable, then often, there can be a dietary or another way of helping manage that, but it doesn't necessarily always mean unhealthy. So it's really hard to define that. But if you're having something that really is, like lots of diarrhea or constipation that's, really bad, and therefore you're feeling horrible. Those would be things that would be, help. That falls under what I do as far as digestive health, or a lot of stomach pain, gas and bloating. And again, doesn't necessarily always mean that it's unhealthy, but certainly there's something that can be done to manage that. And the gut microbes very well could be playing a role.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. And because a lot of people, and I'm seeing that like with that buzzword of gut health, I'm seeing a lot of people talk about, gas and bloating for sure. And I mean, I feel like it's not necessarily hard. I mean, obviously you have, a more educated opinion on this, but to me, it seems like it's not that hard to get bloated because we eat so much processed crap nowadays that something might just not agree with you.
Sure. And there's a certain amount of bloating that is considered perfectly normal. And that's also, I see people who are sometimes concerned because their stomach doesn't look the same in the evening as it does in the morning. And it's, how much of a difference is it? If it's very slight, well, that's very common. If it's more extreme, that's another thing. If it's painful, if you can't, if the way your clothes fit really changes, that's different. So there's trying to kind of find, I think we're focusing in so much on our guts now. There's a difference sometimes between there's a certain amount of normal, and there's also, even some really healthy foods can cause bloating for some people. I think, if we think about the one that's really common would be like beans, right? Some people, no problem with beans. Some people, gas. I have clients say, you don't want to give me beans and be anywhere near me.
Right.
But in all those cases, it doesn't mean that beans are unhealthy for you. It's certainly not good for someone to feel that they don't want to be around anybody. But those are all, microbial reactions, and there doesn't mean they're bad, but obviously it's not good for you. But it doesn't mean it's unhealthy. So it can be really hard to define that. But if your life is changed in that you've got some changes or that were not there before, or that are definitely making your life hard, then that's where you want to seek out some help.
Right. Because it can change over time, right? So maybe you could handle certain foods, or you felt really great a couple years ago, but maybe, something's changing lately, or
absolutely. Absolutely. Things can change. I have clients who say they see seasonal changes. And when you think about it, we eat different things at different times of year too. So that can affect things differently. And we are learning that the gut microbes can change really quickly with diet change. So sometimes in as little as 3 days, there's change. So if you go on vacation and you're eating a lot of stuff you don't normally eat, and then you come back and you don't feel as good, it could be some changes in those microbes, and vice versa.
That makes sense too, like just highlighting the energy that we have, from our food. And I'm assuming that all goes hand in hand with all of the things happening in the gut. Like you said earlier, the hormones and everything else, like that must play a big role in energy.
Absolutely. And what you eat and when you eat it. So there's a lot of pieces to this. So it's separating gut health from how do I feel. And it's hard because there aren't necessarily always tests for this. Like you could go get a test and tell you that you're doing great. And that's one of those red flag things that I always tell my clients about. So I'll tell your listeners too, is to save them money. There's a lot of bogus tests out there. It would be so great if we could go and just test and know that that's what's wrong with us or what's right with us. And then there would be a way to fix it. And maybe in the future we'll be there. We're not there now. The marketing is ahead of the science.
Yeah.
So these food sensitivity tests that are everywhere, and clients bring them to me all the time, with here's what I can't eat. And what bothers me about them so much is just that. It takes someone who might have been doing okay, and suddenly they cut tons of foods out of their diet based on these tests that don't test for anything negative. Yeah. Those tests are IgG, which means that they're testing for, has your body ever seen this before? So very often, if you've eaten something at all in the past, it may show up on those tests. It doesn't mean it's negative. It just means your body's seen it before.
Wow. I'm literally mind blown. And those, and again, back to what you said earlier, those tests cost so much money, whereas you could just sit down with somebody who's actually registered and is a professional in this and could, help you and for like half the cost.
And be able to see through the different, because, there's a lot of layers to this. And like I said, it would be great if we could just do a test, but we can't. And too often those tests are followed up with, here's the supplements to fix it.
Yeah.
And when I'm working with people, often I'm helping them get off these supplements because that's just another piece to cloud the whole picture. And supplements really can't do the same thing as diet. And they often are something that we don't even know about it and what's in those tablets or capsules or powders.
Yeah.
So it's, that's part of that, buyer beware.
I mean, it's insane to me how we're doing these kinds of things, like all of these tests. Or I think I saw one the other day where you could like send in a stool sample and they would like tell you.
Yeah, those are another one of these tests that are really, really, they're expensive and they're not there yet. So it's hard because yes, they could tell you what's in your stool, but that doesn't mean anything because we don't know what the perfect mix of microbes is. We can't say this is what everybody should have because there's probably a lot of really good mixes. And we can't say, oh, you don't have enough. They give you a really nice printout with those tests and they tell you the different categories and they'll tell you you should have this level of this and this level of that. But they're making it up because we don't know what those levels should be.
Yeah.
And very well, different people have different, almost like a fingerprint of their microbes. So to say that yours needs to look just like this or in this range, we don't know that.
It's totally individualized.
It's totally individualized. And we don't even know, there's certain, like families, you could say, of certain microbes that some of them in certain strains aren't good and in other strains could be good. So to generalize and say, for instance, like E. coli, we all heard of E. coli. Totally. And we know that can be really dangerous. Well, there's that one strain that causes that really severe illness and your kidneys can shut down, and that's really dangerous. But there's other E. coli that are actually in some probiotics and considered beneficial. Wow. It depends on the strain. So those printouts that people get are not strain specific.
Okay, yeah.
So they give you generalizations, and then they tell you what supplements to buy to fix it.
Yeah, so that's just... yeah, not the vibe.
Right. So again, I tell people save your money. And you know what we do know is that there are certain foods that can be really beneficial for the gut to help foster the most variety. That's what we've learned so far is that the healthiest gut has the most variety of different microbes. And to do that, you need more variety in what you eat.
Okay.
So the downside of those tests that tell you what you shouldn't eat is that it's starting to cut down on your variety. It's scaring you into thinking you need to eat less of certain food.
Yeah. I was thinking that because when you're getting a test or you're following some random person's $3,000 program, it's more so like telling you what you shouldn't eat. And like you and I have talked about a lot because I'm starting to learn, like I've had kind of an issue with dairy, but that's like an individual thing. And Absolutely. That means that my microbiome isn't handling certain dairy products as well as other people's. But that doesn't mean I go out and write my own program and teach people how to like stay completely away from dairy or this or that or whatever, and then sell it for $3,000 because you can't.
Exactly.
It's individualized. And yeah, those programs are definitely teaching people how to follow certain diet programs that might not be specific. Obviously, they're not specific to those people's, microbiome. So that's why we have to seek the actual help if we feel like we need to do something about this.
Absolutely. Because again, and I can't say it enough, you never want to restrict your diet any more than you absolutely have to. And there's certain foods that are kind of almost like the buzzword to avoid now.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it all the time with my clients. I don't eat dairy. I don't eat gluten. Mm-hmm. And, I don't eat
totally
sugar.
Fallen into that. Yeah.
And in some cases it makes sense, but it's not kind of this blanket statement, recommendation that a lot of people are getting. And there's a lot of doctors that even say this because they just know that, well, these things sometimes bother people, so let's just tell people not to eat any of them.
Yeah.
Without realizing what happens from that is people then become afraid to eat because they're trying to avoid all these foods. They're still not feeling good. Then all of a sudden it gets scary to go out to dinner because you're not sure how to choose what to eat. You don't want to go to your friend's house for dinner because you don't want to tell them you can't eat all the things they're going to cook for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a really stressful thing. And all of a sudden your social life's, affected, your emotional life is affected, and all for things that you may not even need to avoid. Yeah. So there's a lot of real negative things that happen from this. And then you become actually not to a point where you're not getting the nutrition you need because you've cut too many things out.
Makes sense. It's like you're almost reversing, your microbiome in a way, like you're eating too much of the same things.
Right.
I don't even know how to describe that, but it makes a lot of sense.
Well, there's a common diet that I see around in our area when people have come to me and they eat 4 foods. I always say it's that diet. It's the chicken, brown rice, blueberries, spinach diet.
Whoa.
Because it's like, okay, well, these are safe foods from everything that has been taken away from me by various recommendations or looking on the internet. And then they can check up, I'm eating a protein, I'm eating a grain, I'm eating a fruit, and I'm eating a vegetable. But actually, when you look at it, it's such a limited diet. And they're eating only 3 different plant foods.
Yeah.
And you might remember this from when we spoke last time, that there's a study that shows that people who eat 30 or more different plant foods a week have the healthiest digestive systems.
Yeah, I do. I always try to count them, and then I'm like, oh gosh.
It's a lot. It's a lot. But I always tell people, don't hear that number 30 and feel overwhelmed. It's just that feeling of, can you slowly add in something new or try something new? But when you start, cutting down out of fear or out of discomfort or out of too much, hard to understand advice that you've found out on, from other people or the internet that may not be true, you've cut yourself back. So it really is about trying to add these foods in because each of those little microbes that we have living in us, they all like different foods. So you want to feed them, and the foods that they eat are plant foods with carbohydrate that are plants.
Can we actually touch on that? It's a little bit out of the realm of what we're talking about in a way, but I'm curious to know a little bit more too about, I don't know if it's hormones or what, but when you're eating a lot of junk food or you're eating just really crappy, and then you start you want to eat that salad or you want to eat something with more vegetables and your body needs it, but there's like a mental thing because we're already craving that food that we've been eating. That makes sense.
There's actually studies that show that those little microbes can actually affect your taste. So if you can eat more plants kind of for 2 weeks, you start to crave them more.
Wow.
That's what we've learned. So it's just those taste buds turn over relatively quickly.
Yeah.
So your taste will change, and the microbes actually seem to play a role in that.
Wow. So
it's really interesting.
Yeah. So it's almost like, breaking that, I don't want to say addiction, but lack of better words, it's just kind of like breaking that, that craving of those types of foods. And then hope in about 2 weeks or so, you'll actually be able to eat better.
Then it'll start to sound more appealing. But those taste buds will turn over in about 2 weeks. And then those foods will start to seem more like what you want. And it's really interesting, but it does mean there's that, 2-week time that it might feel like, you're doing something that doesn't feel like a lot of fun. But do it slowly. I always tell my clients, think about even just adding 1 plant food a week that's new, and just think how you're going to add that in sometime during your week, and just slowly build. It doesn't have to be all at once. I mean, okay, today I'm going to go out and eat a giant salad with, 30 different things in it.
Right.
And then you don't feel good, because the other thing is when you change your diet from something that's more refined, like more junk and less plants,
yeah,
your you've lost some of those microbes that want to eat those plants. And so you may feel more bloating after the fact until they get used to it.
That makes
So
sense.
there could be a transitional time too.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think that's really important for people to know too, is, it's a process.
It's a process, right? And you start slow. And that's, when I work with people, we will start with, we pick foods, we do it in really small amounts. There's this kind of a set way to reintroduce things. Because again, you want to, build those microbes back up. Then now they're getting fed. Now they're going to start to multiply, and those may help you digest foods better. Because one of the things they do is they break down some of those fibers that we don't, by definition, fiber is a carbohydrate our bodies don't digest. But sometimes the microbes can digest it.
Wow.
So that's like beans. None of us have the enzymes. None of us have the enzymes to break down beans, but those little microbes can break it down. So some people, that's why they have no problem. They have the microbes that are breaking down the beans for them, and they're doing well. But if you don't have a lot of those microbes, then that's where people can get gassy.
So that's where, like, full circle, that's kind of why it's important to introduce different types of foods into your diet so that you can feed the bacteria that can break it.
Try to build them back up slowly and so that you can start to tolerate more of them.
Okay. This is interesting.
So, but again, it's about inclusion, not exclusion. Yeah. And that's what's, it may not be as sexy to, to say, just include more food rather than here's the things to cut out of your diet. Yeah. Here's my list and here's my book. But it really is about trying to include more. And we're at such a great time of year right now. I mean, especially where we are here. My Sunday, it always is part of going to our big farmers market here. Yeah. And, we're just starting to see the spring vegetables and fruits coming into season. And so it's a lot more fun than buying things all winter. But it's, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I haven't bought this for a while. And what can I do with this? And just start bringing in more, new vegetables, more new fruit. How could I cook them? How could I add them to my meals?
Yeah.
And those are some of the things that I help people work with.
That's awesome. And you can, that's the thing about, again, like the one-on-one working with somebody, is because then what's actually happening. Like, you have a great understanding of knowing, like, maybe this person feels this way, maybe they need a little more of this in their diet, or it's like one-on-one where they're talking about what people are eating.
Right.
Rather than the exclusion.
It's very individualized, because people want to find out what works for them and what they might be missing.
Yeah.
And how to do that. How do you bring things back into your diet so that it isn't uncomfortable, or what makes sense for you? And there are those cases where there may be some foods someone can't eat, but you want to make sure we identify those. And one of the biggest, I think, mistakes, if you want to say, is the whole gluten-free thing. So yes, someone with celiac disease, absolutely not. No gluten, can't be, have even the tiniest bit. That's a gluten-free diet for life at this point. And someone with a wheat allergy, obviously you can't have wheat, so you can't have gluten.
Right.
But a lot of people who think they're gluten intolerant because they just cut it out and they said they felt better, it might be gluten, but it very well may be something else. And very often my clients find that it is something else. Oh. And you can certainly have a very healthy diet without gluten, but sometimes if you can include it, that can be really healthy, because actually the wheat bran or barley, which also is a gluten-containing, or rye, gluten-containing grains, there's a lot about them that are very healthy, and they have prebiotics in them. And are you familiar with, I think we touched on it last time, but the term prebiotic, I want to make sure your listeners understand that.
Yeah, let's go over it again though.
Sure. So prebiotic, by definition, those are the foods that feed the microbes in your gut and provide a health benefit. And we have to have studies that show that for it to be considered a prebiotic. So a lot of times these terms are thrown around, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have the research to support that. But that's what, when we do, that's what prebiotic is. So
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's interesting, I think, to highlight the fact that it's found in foods because so many of us are used to hearing about prebiotics, probiotics through supplements.
Right. And supplements, food first. And particularly, there's a lot of probiotic taking. And that's, probiotics, people think, oh, that's what I take for gut health. Well, maybe not. Sometimes probiotics can actually make some of those symptoms feel worse.
Wow.
Probiotics are very, like we were talking about earlier, strain specific. So to just go out and take a probiotic, just like saying, I'm going to go out and take medicine. You'd want to be like, what are you taking and why are you taking it and how much are you taking? And is this the one that you're supposed to take? Right. If someone said, oh, I've got high blood pressure, so I'm taking medicine that I found.
Wow.
Questions, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with probiotics. There's thousands of strains of bacteria, and we've just, we have to study them to know which ones do what. They're not all the same. So just taking one, and some people go like, well, I take one with a multi-strain probiotic, so I'm getting lots of good ones. Well, maybe, but it may not be doing anything for you. We don't know how it mixes with what you have, and it's not necessarily always the particular bacteria. It may be what those bacteria produce, the metabolite, that is causing all the benefit, and that's now getting its own term, postbiotic. So what these bacteria produce, which are sometimes it's vitamins, sometimes it's metabolites that help, like there's one short chain fatty acids that protect the colon, and they also have some other benefits for the immune system. We're now finding that there's even components in dead bacteria that actually may have benefit, that may be part of the postbiotic. So they're not even always alive, which is what the focus always has been on probiotics. So there's a lot to this. So the best thing is if you can eat the foods that we know feed what you've got in your gut, the good guys, shall we say, and that are providing something beneficial for you, that's where we can have the most control, I guess, if you want to put it that way.
I could just I wish you taught weekly classes on this or something. I could just listen to this all day.
It's absolutely so fascinating. And I do love this area because there's so much to learn and there's new research coming out all the time. And if anything, if I can help people understand that it's about inclusion and not exclusion, then I feel like I've won, because there is so much out there about what to cut out.
Yeah, that's the thing. So is that kind of obviously the biggest myth you're hearing, but what are some of the other ones? I know we talked about testing.
Right. The testing, the probiotics.
Yeah.
I think a big one right now is the bone broth.
Oh, I've heard about this too. Yeah.
I mean, bone broth is great. I mean, I always joke around. My grandmother called it chicken soup.
Right.
She made it out of bones as well. It's fine. It's perfectly healthy, but there is absolutely no research to show it does anything for your gut. The whole thing about it protects your gut. It's good for gut health. It's good for leaky gut.
Yes.
There's absolutely nothing to that. And it's just kind of funny that, now bone broth is so expensive if you buy it.
Yeah.
Because there's been all these, health, woo attached to it that just isn't, if you want to drink that and you enjoy it and you want to make soup out of it, fantastic. But it's not doing anything magical for your gut. And another one that goes along with that, which is part of that, is collagen. So collagen protein is getting all this, special time in the light these days. and that also, the studies that shown that it's good for skin and joints is questionable, because a lot of times it's done by people selling the collagen proteins. There's a little bit of research that shows that may be the case. But on the other hand, when we always, and you would know this, Audrey, when we look at something for, what is the benefit of it. We're not just looking at the study. We look at what is called the mechanism of action. So that's what we want the study to show us eventually is what is happening? What can we see happening? And can we repeat this? So collagen is made up, like other proteins, of amino acids. So when we eat protein, those proteins don't go to parts of our body. They get broken down into individual amino acids. And then our body, based on our DNA, puts it back together in the proteins that our body needs. So eating a magical protein like collagen doesn't mean the collagen goes to your joints. It's going to get broken down into its individual components, and then your body's going to put it back together again.
Yeah.
So it gets put in the pool with other protein that you might eat. So, again, yes, there's a little bit showing it might be good for your skin, but there's a lot of question about that.
It seems like the best thing to do is just go back to the way we used to eat generations ago and be as healthy as they were. I mean, they would work from sun up to sundown, and they I mean.
Well, it really is, it has gotten a little out of control with all this. I want to say, we think we can do better than food with supplements and potions and all of this, but really food first. There's cases, sure, where supplements are needed based on if you're taking a particular medication or if you have a particular, disease or something going on in your body that needs a particular additional, maybe vitamins or minerals or some supplement. So sometimes it makes sense.
Right.
But there's an awful lot out there that is just created strictly to sell to people who are fearful.
My goodness. Yeah. And they're making so much money off of all of this when, we just need to, for the most part, we just need to spend more time eating, from the earth.
Right. Exactly. So again, that more plants.
Yeah.
Again, think of that 30 different plants. And again, 30 plants, a lot of times people think that's a lot of vegetables. It's not all vegetables. When we talk about plant foods, it's fruits and vegetables, it's whole grains, and it's legumes, your dried peas, lentils, beans, nuts and seeds, and even some, like herbs and spices, those fall into those plants.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean you have to be a vegetarian. It just means the majority of your plate, and the majority should be plants.
Yeah.
And it really falls more on the Mediterranean diet pattern, which I think we've talked about in the past, which is, fish is part of that. Less red meat, but again, it's more of these plants and grains.
So much better for us. Oh, that's what I also wanted to ask was, in a pinch, how do you feel about frozen vegetables?
I think frozen vegetables are great. I tell my clients that all the time. Go get yourself frozen fruits and vegetables that you like. If you find them on sale, get lots and stock your freezer up.
Okay.
And that way you never are in a situation where you can say, well, I had to throw away what I bought at the farmer's market. It sounded great at the time, but I didn't have time to make it, or I didn't really know what to do with it. And I threw it away and I wasted my money.
Yep. That's what I've been doing.
Or you're really busy and you don't get to the store and you come home and you're tired and you're hungry and you're like, great, now I have no vegetables. I'm not going to the store, so I'm going to eat something else, or no fruit. So frozen are great. They're frozen right out of the fields. Sometimes they're even fresher than what we might get in the stores, depending how long they've been sitting on the shelves and where they came from. So absolutely frozen are great.
Cool. That's good, because I was kind of worried about that, actually.
Yes. And you can add them to things. I always tell people, keep them, and then you can always add them. If you're making soup, throw in some extra frozen vegetables. If you've got a stew, or even if you're eating a frozen dinner or a prepared dinner from a store, you can always make it even better by throwing in some more vegetables.
Oh, that's such a good idea. Yeah, that's not too hard.
No, I mean, none of this means you have to, go out and suddenly become, a cook who sits in your kitchen all the time. There's plenty of ways to eat really healthy food without having to spend the time, or if it's just something that you're not interested in.
Yeah. Oh,
but those greens powders and special things, that's not the same.
See, so that's good to know. If you want the convenience, go for like a frozen food or something like that.
Or if you want convenience, there's ways to get convenient plant foods in your area too.
Yeah.
But the powders, it sounds magical, it sounds easy, but they're really not. So
Wow.
it's not the same.
Oh, that's so awesome. I think we've busted so many of these like myths because it's like, that's what you see, right? You scroll through Instagram. It's like, I made my green smoothie with my powder and then I had my bone broth. And then
Right,
I
exactly.
I went to yogurt with friends, but I just didn't get anything. And
Right. And and eating with other people and the social part. I mean, we eat for other reasons than just to put the right thing in our body. It's a social connection. It's cultural. We're about coming into, Easter and Passover. And, there's a lot of connection over food. So it's not all just about taking a pill.
Yeah.
And it should be. We also know that you digest better when you eat with other people and that it's part of, a connection. Can I bust two more?
Please.
That are important to me? As you mentioned, the
Take
Instagram scroll, the ones that I see, the one that I keep, disconnecting from my list or unfollowing. So big one that we hear a lot is lectins. You heard that one?
Oh, no.
Okay, so lectins are mostly in beans and grains. There's a particular doctor who's pushing a big book, and actually one of the doctors that I work with had actually recommended this book to a patient, and when the patient told him I said no, he called me and wanted to know why.
Oh, awesome!
And I had to tell him it's because there's no evidence in there. But lectins are just something that's actually a protein that's in a lot of beans, some grains. It's connected with certain other vegetables as being an anti-nutrient. It's kind of a scare tactic that these aren't good for us. This is not the case. The only thing that would not be good for lectins is if you ate raw, uncooked kidney beans, then it would be toxic. I don't know anyone that chooses to do that.
Yeah, no thanks.
But if anyone sees that lectins are not good for them or dangerous or not good for their gut health, I hope they ignore that and don't buy the book.
Yeah.
Or spend the $3,000 on the lecture.
Yeah, please don't.
And the other one is nightshade. And a lot of people will give me as one of the groups that they don't eat. And that had some connection at one point to arthritis. Nightshades, if anyone doesn't know what they are, is tomatoes, eggplant, potatoes, bell peppers, that family of vegetables. But that really has not panned out. We don't see that those vegetables do anything negative. And in fact, they're very anti-inflammatory in many cases.
Oh, wow.
Harvard School of Public Health had this really nice poster of anti-inflammatory foods and some of the top highest anti-inflammatory foods. And the first one on there was tomatoes. So I use that a lot when I talk to groups to show them that, it's, if you hear that a plant isn't good for you, that would be one that we normally eat. And step back and think, where do they eat it in other parts of this world too? Beans in particular are everywhere.
Yeah.
And if we look at the blue zones, which are the areas of the world where people live the longest, they all eat beans.
Wow.
And if you think of the Mediterranean diet, which is really kind of based on what's eaten in those Mediterranean countries or that pattern, it's tomatoes are a big part of it, eggplant, peppers. Yeah. So again, when you hear, I just hope that when people hear some of these things that they realize that, does this make any sense?
Yeah, because you can see some, like back to Instagram or something like that, but you can see somebody who makes it look so glamorous to not eat beans or whatever it is. But it's like, you do have to stop and actually think about it for yourself.
Exactly. And again, it is individualized. So if beans really bother you, then maybe it's not comfortable for you to eat them, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily hurting you.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not eat something if it makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah. Just add more plants though.
Right.
Continue
add other
having
plants.
plants.
Or find a way to do it slowly, or sometimes, there's other ways sometimes that they can be added in or certain types. Some beans may be better tolerated for some people than other types.
Yeah. That's one more thing I wanted to touch on too is, we talked about like the process of, the 2 weeks in between kind of thing. And you might be a little bloated as well for a couple days when you're getting into more plant-based diet. But I was going to ask about, as we switch over, I've heard it said to be careful not to eat too many raw vegetables all at once because of bloating. Is that true for you or?
It really depends on the person.
Okay.
Some people raw doesn't bother them. Some people it does.
Okay.
So again, it really is an individualized thing as far as how to introduce foods back into your diet if you haven't been eating them for a while. But it isn't always black and white. It's the raw vegetables, or it's the the beans, or it's the peppers, or different people will have different. It can have different effects. And again, there are people who certain foods will not sit well. There are definitely some that might cause diarrhea for some people based on how they're absorbed. And that's fine. But you never want to cut something out completely if you don't know for sure. Sometimes you can eat a little bit of it and you're fine. But if you eat more than that, you're not fine. And it's really important to try to learn. And that's what I do when I work with people is we learn where their tolerant level stops so that you can still go out, let's say, and have a meal with a friend and know that you can have a little bit of what's being offered, but you just may not want to have as much as everybody else of that particular foods, right? And we all have different, ways our digestion works, little subtleties. So, what works for someone else may not work for you, but what's important is finding out what does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just again, don't pay the $3,000 for some program and just figure out what you need to do for yourself and what's going to make you feel the best.
It is really, with Instagram and all the other social media, it's so easy to be led down a path, because someone sounds like they're speaking to you at a time when you're probably just feeling frustrated and this person's going to tell you how to fix it.
Yeah.
But if it costs, really costs big money, and also, who are the people that are studying this? So make sure it's really someone who works in this area, especially if it's a connection to food. It should be a dietitian because, even though that term sounds really outdated, dietitian we are the ones that go through all the education on nutrition and how it ties into may work with your medications and may work with other things going on in your life. It's, nutrition's all we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Seriously.
And then everybody has their specialty in, as dietitians. So, I chose this specialty because I love to help people eat. When people meet me, I always say there's kind of two, some dietitians are really about being really regimented, and I'm all about how can we eat more?
Yeah. What can we have?
Right. And how can I help you eat more? So that's really make sure that people, I hope that people listening to you will understand to make sure they're getting their information from the right places.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to ask you too, if you have do you have any books that you would recommend or?
Actually, there is one that I really like. She's an Australian dietitian and PhD and is still involved in research right now.
Nice.
And her name is Megan Rossi. Eat Yourself Healthy and Eat More, Live Well is her new one.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that should be your tagline.
And she also has one called Love Your Gut.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
But those are the books that I recommend for really good sources.
Yeah. See, that's what we want, are good sources. I'll make sure that I link your website and your Instagram in the show notes because those are both very great resources as well. Thank you. And then can I ask you, if you remember, I always like to ask for, just a tip on self-care, something that you love to do or
well, join me at the Sunday Farmers Market. No, self-care really is enjoy your food. Relax. Don't be afraid of food. All these fear tactics are out there. Stop, enjoy, and try to include more.
I think that's very well said. Yeah. We have to get back to doing that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kim. I'm so glad we got to do this. Like, truly,
I am too.
I appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Audrey, for the opportunity.
Yay. I'm so happy you were able to make it to another awesome episode. Don't forget, if this resonated with you, take a screenshot, tag me in it on Instagram at enlightened.wellness. Or if it's something that one of your friends needs to hear, don't hesitate to send it out. Let's get this message across. Have a blessed day.